Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com, or this week's episode of the Market Monday. This week I am going to talk about Modern and why I think it's a good time to sell out of the format in anticipation of what I call fatigue, and then rebuy back in a few months. I think that we're going to have a very similar year as 2016. 2016 was kind of a rough year for Modern. We had some early spikes for the entire format like we're seeing right now. And then across the board, almost every Modern staple, if it didn't say Eldrazi or was not included in Eldrazi deck, went down in value. It was kind of the breakout deck of that time period, and the deck was sort of a new thing, and people bought into that. But across the board, even cards like Burn, cards in the various blue-white control decks, cards in Jund and Abzan and those specific staples of Modern all simultaneously went down in the 2016. We'll check that out in a second here. But why I think this is very, very reminiscent of 2016 is we're seeing a massive runaway prices of the more staple cards in the Modern format. So we're talking about cards like Mox Opal and Dark Confidant, and we're even seeing some of the new hits that go in some decks like Gemstone Caverns go up, and Caverns of Soul, which is a pretty steady staple for a ton of different decks, start to spike up in value. We're even seeing cards from Iconic Masters have pretty decent returns, like the Grove of the Burn Willows and the Horizon Canopy. And just across the board, we're seeing this massive Modern activity. But I think it's about to come to the end, because we're also at this point where Modern is getting very, very expensive, and it is going to cause what I like to call that fatigue. And it could actually shift people over to buying more budget-based decks like the Storm. And so if you want to like re-diversify back in cards, I think have a good potential of going back up, you can definitely look at a deck like this $300 Burn deck for people that are trying to get into Modern as having a competitive deck for a fifth of the cost, a sixth of the cost of other Modern decks. And then, of course, that just causes prices in this particular deck to go up. So the decks that I definitely think that it's time that if you invested in these particular cards, capitalize on it. It's time to get out. The first one, of course, is Jund. Jund has had a massive price increase due to the unbanning of Bloodbraid Elf. Bloodbraid Elf is now, a $9, $8 card itself, and it jumped back up the price of cards like Tarmogoyf and Dark Confidant. So you can see that the unbanning of Bloodbraid and this shot back up to the $80 value. Tarmogoyf was doing this decay for the longest period of time. This is from Modern Masters 2017. This is the reprint, the straw that broke the camel's back, and it was going to continue this downward decline where people stubbornly held onto their Tarmogoyfs in anticipation it would go up again. Well, they got lucky with the Bloodbraid Elf unbanning, and it did go up, but I think this is probably about the true value of a Mythic that's been printed 4 times now, is around the $80 price tag. Dark Confidant has also seen a huge increase, but usually when you see these type of increases, you see a price adjustment. So, I mean, here's a similar increase here. I think this is actually a reprinting of it, and then it got crashed way down in value, and then it starts to go back up. Dark Confidant sometimes isn't the most staple of cards in the Junds and Abzans, because when other hyper-aggressive decks come into the meta, Dark Confidant is usually the last thing you want in your deck because it actually helps the burns and those type of stuff. But it is also, it's a really good card versus the mid-range. And so a deck like, or a card like Jace, of course, is going to spark a lot of interest into Dark Confidant. So I think that this one is going to see a massive price correction. We saw, I believe, the Ravnica ones even go up even further in value. Nope, they did spike up to 95 and then back down to 90. And so if you do have Dark Confidants, this is also probably the time to sell them off. I would even be comfortable selling them off around the $80 mark and just getting a bit better safe than sorry and getting the value out of a card like this. This is also probably going to encourage Wizards to do a reprint as quick as possible for these particular Modern cards. There's already a massive outcry in the price of cards. We saw what the Challenger decks did, which even spun a whole anti-Magic the Gathering finance movement which I won't try to get into. It will just get me raging again about the misinformation spread around in these videos and people just not understanding how markets work. If you have a trade binder, if you have a collection in Magic the Gathering, if you collect cards or even build decks, you're part of the MTG finance community. You're part of the supply and demand. And it's just ridiculous, the and the finance movement. Again, I'm sure a lot of people will say that this was a buyout, which it could have been, but this is usually what ends up with buyouts is some speculators making an educated guess. Actually, not really an educated guess. They're just figuring out the supply of these cards and the movement, because there's a lot of software right now that can track the movement in. If you go to even places like MTG Stocks or MTG Price, it kind of shows the quantities that each of the vendors has up for sale and shows you massive movement swings. And so if you have the information, say, okay, Dark Confidant about here is going to be sold out at this price. So I can buy these copies right now here, and then when it hits the natural demand, sell them off, and then that'd be the same as, you know, waiting till it went up to this price. So that's exactly how speculation works. It just accelerates that process. And if you do have Dark Confidants, for example, if you just have them in decks and you're not playing your Jund deck at the moment, I think it's a good time just to sell it right now and buy it back within a couple of months. So the fatigue, I think, will be very real. There's a lot of things coming out in this year that could distract away from Modern. There is Dominaria, which might have a huge nostalgic feel to it. If Standard is good, a lot of people will gravitate back over to Standard. We could have another resurgence because of the price of Modern back into formats like Commander or Pauper. They could take the focus away, and naturally the cards just start to decay because of that. I mean, across the board, though, even cards as new as Kolaghan's Command have spiked up in value. And cards like Tireless Tracker have even spiked up in value, which is crazy that Tireless Tracker is nearing its highest point now outside of Standard. So Tireless Tracker got up at one point. Yep, it is its highest price right now. So even during its heydays, when it was seeing plays 4 of in a Standard deck, in a relatively healthy Standard with a lot of people playing the format, it is now higher because of Modern. So to me, that just is a huge tell that Modern is overinflated at the moment, and there has to be a price correction or just a market correction in these type of cards. So Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant, one thing, even though the supply of those are incredibly high, Tireless Tracker is just an absolute huge sign that this is an overinflated market at the moment. And as soon as the people are still holding on to cards, not willing to sell because people are still thinking that it's hot, this trajectory is going to keep up. And I just cannot for the life of me see this as sustainable. If you actually look at MTGO, Modern and Standard are head and head for the most popular formats on MTGO. I'm gonna have to kind of feel the waters in people's, in paper, and see what GP tournaments and things like that to see exactly where Modern even compares to Standard. And the sad thing is Standard's actually in a bad place right now. So Standard I think that's one of the thing that it has is going for Modern is Standard has just been kind of boring. And in these last tournament results over the weekend showed Mono Red Aggro, 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 and Grixis or Black Blue Glint Sleeve Siphoner variants. It's basically we're down to a two deck format again in Standard. Where so there you see it. These are very similar decks here. All of these, right on the top. These are either Glint Sleeve Siphoner decks, and there's the one that doesn't use Glint Sleeve Siphoner, and then there's the Mono Red Aggro. So here's what I'm talking about here: Blue Black Control, Grixis, Mono Red, Mono Red, Mono Red, and it's starting to seem to be another solved format. The Black Blue mid range is your value based deck. Grixis Energies is splashes for the red, and so we're still having the problem. What I said all along, that wasn't energy. The problem is just the removal package being too strong for both for mid-range type non-value strategies to exist. So right now what can exist in Standard is just mid-range, like a kind of a tempo-based strategy with Glint Sleeve Siphoner, which was the exact same thing that Teamer Energy did with the Rogue Refiner. It was a 3-2 that drew to drew a card and gave you 2 energy that could do various different things. So it was just an aggressive value-based card that could get the job done. And now we're seeing that with the banning of green, it just shifted over to how black energy, blue-black mid-range with Glint Sleeve Siphoner played that kind of role, following it up with Fatal Push and Vraska's Contempt. So if you actually look at the history of Standard, the 2 decks that have been able to compete for the longest time have had very efficient removal, either in the form of Harness Lightning, Lightning Strike, Magma Jets, or in the Fatal Push, Vraska's Contempt slots. So I think that's been the problem all along. I don't see Standard ever fixing itself. You'd have to keep, unless they would ban specific early removal-based cards to try to shake things up, which I don't think they'd ever do. We're still going to see these value tempo strategies be the king of Standard, which has caused a disinterest in Standard. I actually think the gameplay goes okay. It does reward, I don't know, I'm kind of bittersweet about it. It does reward tight play and managing your resources correctly. However, the RNG for Standard seems incredibly high. A lot of the games or especially in these sort of mirror-esque matchups, it's whoever can draw the best off their deck or have the right curve, rather than the correct play. And those are type of formats that I like to find I'm very disinterested in that. And that's why I think a lot of people have gravitated over to Modern. But that doesn't mean that the signs aren't there and ready to pop. You can basically click on any one of these decks, and there are a lot of hyper-inflated cards at the moment, which I believe have to correct. We have even the cards like the Unclaimed Territory that remain high because of Modern. This is another card that's going to get a massive reprint in the Challenger decks. I've been trying to get rid of these as quickly as possible. Field of Ruin's another one that I've been selling out of like crazy and finding buyers all day long because it's another card that is included in the Challenger decks. So even cards like Ancient Ziggurat, this is a card that could easily be put in any sort of commander-based set or box set. These are very dangerous cards to hold on to. I try to force myself a rule that once my specs have increased in maybe 2-fold or 1-fold, that I have to make the safer route and just sell it off. A lot of people get stuck with the what ifs. I've caught myself with that too. Spell Queller, for example, is a card I'm kicking myself about because my entire goal was to get out of these before they were included in treasure chests, and unfortunately I missed the mark. And what was ended up happening here is I actually spec'd right here. They got up to 8, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wait till they get up to 9 or 10, and then I'll sell. And I missed my opportunity. And now I'm stuck with all these spell callers, which are doing these little dips. And I know exactly why. There's someone that is speccing into these and rinse and repeating them over and over and over again. And it's going to be hard for me to compete with that until this somehow does outstrip, the supply outstrips, and the demand can get there. But by adding these into treasure chest, I might have just completely hindered my ability to not only make money, but recoup my money. So it requires a lot of discipline in MTG Finance to just say, okay, I made it. I don't need to, I go for the double rather than the home run type thing, or even go for the single a lot of times for a baseball analogy, rather than try to knock it out of the park. It's always fun when you do get a knock out of the park. But more often than not, if you miss that window to sell off once it's had that spike, you do. I mean, this is going to happen more than often than this going up to here, for example. So I think Modern is riddled with these. My sells would definitely be cards like Tireless Tracker. The amount of Tireless Trackers out there is just so great that it's going to require a price adjustment on a recently rotated standard card. If you actually look at even cards like the Eldrazi deck cards like the Thought-Knot Seer, and they are still quite low and have a very similar supply as the Tireless Tracker. However, they haven't budged in price at the moment. So people would say, well, maybe that's a good investment strategy right there. Let's see if we can find Eldrazi Tron here. So what I'm talking about is there's not a lot of movement in cards like Reality Smasher. It's still near its low at the moment. I mean, it dipped down to $3.50, went back to $3.90, but it's still here, still very flatline because it's a recently rotated card. The same can be said about the Thought-Knot Seer. It's starting to see some movement again though, but it still had this flat price tag. We go over to Mattery Shaper, which is a card that I liked investing in. I got in for low, for half price around here for people that were selling off Matter Shapers. It's even dipped down even more, and this deck sees a lot of play every now and again when it is the flavor of the week for Modern. Modern has a very weird meta at the moment where decks will dominate for about a week, and then people will bring in the decks that typically do well against those particular decks. And I think maybe Eldrazi Tron has been kind of replaced by Bloodbraid Elf Jund as a better way of doing what Eldrazi Tron used to do, is it overwhelm with threats and have either go over the top of aggro decks, or just add too much value for control decks to keep up. And maybe Bloodbraid Elf is just doing a better job at this particular strategy. But you can see the trajectory is looking nice on all those Eldrazi cards. That could be a place for a quick investment. However, I do highly discourage you from really entering into it at the moment, because I don't see it panning off in the later 2018 for Modern to continue this crazy runaway prices. Another card that I've been kind of watching closely is Walking Ballista. The thing about Walking Ballista is if people want to upgrade their green black Constrictor deck, it's going to require some more Walking Ballistas, the Challenger decks. But there is one included in the Challenger decks, and right now the Walking Ballista itself pays for that Challenger deck. So what that's going to do almost pays for that Challenger deck. So what it's going to do is it's going to have people like me that have access to those decks for about $16, and I'm a small fish in this field. I'm sure that bigger distributors and bigger stores have probably access around the $12 mark for the Challenger decks. They're gonna be able to just to piece these apart and sell them. So I'm trying to figure out if Challenger decks do have opportunity, or are just too little too late for particular cards that are needed as 4-ofs in the decks, or 3-ofs or 4-ofs in the decks to actually spike the price. But I mean, you can see that the standard base card is probably holding a lot of its value from being played in these modern base decks, and the supply of these are quite high from A3 Volt. If we just check out some of the other formats here, or some of the other decks in standard, we're actually even starting to see some runaway prices, and even like the burn. A lot of the pieces in burn have started to increase nicely day to day. Look at that. There's a common that is quite expensive, $5 at the moment here. There's my whole argument against Pauper can't go up. Look at all these modern cards that have gone up. And yeah, just like I said, the Mox Opal, very good sign of the format, in my opinion, being a little bit inflated, if not fully out of control inflated for the price versus the actual demand of these particular cards. So where to invest, though, if you sell these off? Again, I think it's still a win what's the more likely scenario? The more likely scenario is if you start investing in cards like this, and they could still go up, like you get into some of these Dark Confidence and Mox Opals and whatnot, or you let Modern have a breather. We're entering the spring, and then we'll be entering the summer, where typically Commander reigns supreme. And then invest in some of these underrated Commander cards that are starting to outstretch the supply. So look back at like the Theros block, Return to Ravnica block, all the way up to even Khans block for these Commander-based cards that see a lot of play, and knowing there's a Commander deck that's coming out, and you try to get ahead of the cards that will naturally go in those Commander decks. Is that a better strategy than to invest in a format that could have some more crazy increases, but most likely is nearing its end for investable cards? Now, of course, there is still probably some good targets here. If any starts getting more popular again, yeah, you could get back into Inkmoth Nexuses. They seem to be having their almost their 2-year low right now at $17, and this card is at one point been a $40 card. The same thing with a card like Blinkmoth Nexus. You say, okay, I'm gonna bet on the entire format itself. Blinkmoth Nexus could follow a trajectory like Dark Confidant that got crushed after the reprint, and now is a very cheap card, a $5 card that sees play as a 4-of in Affinity, and is now even starting to see play in these like Colorless Eldrazi based decks. Is that the right route to go? But so I think that's a better investable strategy than trying to hit these more staple pieces. I would look for I wouldn't call them tier 2, but I'd look for some undervalued cards with similar low supplies in this little list here. Rather than going into the high value based cards. Speaking of Iconic Masters, there are some goodies that I think are going to start to readjust. You just see, like, look at the Cryptic Command has went from $22 to $30. We have, if we just look at this set's actually starting to look like a decent little set now. We have Horizon Canopy that has started to increase. It doesn't look like much, but 33 to 36, when we probably haven't seen the end of the supply of Iconic Masters, that's a very good sign for a card like this. Then we have even the big winner out of this set is the Grove of the Burnwillows that I think went down to all the way down to $8. Okay, $11, and has already recouped back up to $6.35. So again, we're seeing a lot of movement in these particular cards. I like cards like Grove because Grove have at one point been the top of the food chain here. They've had Red Green Eldrazi or Red Green Tron has been the go-to strategy before because it had access to cards like Pyroclasm, and then people switched over because of Death Shadow over to more of a black Tron or just a mono green Tron because they needed to be quicker than what the red used to offer with Pyroclasm, or they needed just the safety net of either Path to Exile or Fatal Push, and so they just completely cut red because red, the whole point was Pyroclasm and a few other cards here and there. Well, we could see a Tron-based strategy come back into the fold that uses Pyroclasm, or like we've seen right now, we can see an entire red-green Eldrazi that's using like Birds of Paradise, and it's just trying to ramp out with kind of mana dorks to accelerate into those Thought-Knot Seers and whatnot. So Grove of the Burnwillows is, of course, the perfect card for that. And that's what's increased the movement of this particular card. There's also cards like Elish Norn that have already done similar, had similar bottoming outs and then recouping quite quickly. So if you see this was printed in Modern Masters 2015, went all the way down to 12, so it's halved its value. And from January 2016 to July or I guess it'd be August or September, before it was reprinted again in Iconic, it went all the way back up to 27. So this would be a smart little thing to start not dumping a lot of money into or a lot of trade value into, just getting these low pieces while they're low and waiting them for the increase and just being patient with these type of cards. These are where I like to be investing. I don't like in these more high risk, high reward, modern high value modern type cards. We could see another runaway in price in Snapcaster Mage. I wouldn't even be surprised if a card like Snapcaster Mage is the next one to hit $100, even though the supply of this is really great, just because of how the modern climate is just so crazy right now. But usually those things have every action has a reaction, and every action has a recourse, and that could be something with Modern, is we could see a massive just people ragging about the format being inaccessible, and seeing Wizards responding, or just seeing people new people not getting into the format, or like we saw last time, demanding a format in between Standard and Modern. And that could also cut into the prices of those particular cards. So what this whole point of Market Monday is to I think that the lesson is, if your cards spike up in value, and especially your cards that are in Modern, like those Tireless Trackers, like those Bloodbraid Elves, and those Tarmogoyfs and Dark Confidants, and of many of these cards that have done this quick increase. These now we're looking at Gaddock Teague. Gaddock Teague is an entire speculation on the new Amber Mox, or Mox Amber, that it's going to be playable, and we don't even know. That's the big what if with Gaddock Teague. It's also a legendary creature, where legendary matters. So there's a lot of speculation on these type of cards, with the Gaddock Teague just going through the roof of increasing from $19 to $40, because it's one of the only 2-mana legendary creatures with a mana. You look at other cards like Anathenza. I wonder if Mox Amber will actually help with like an Abzan deck wanting to run that. I highly doubt it, though. It's very, very, that card's awkward with the curves. But cards like this is when you sell. I don't think that if you miss the investable opportunity, don't worry. Just all the copies you do have, get out of them, get into the more stable prices of like Commander, and just sit on those for a while. And you'll thank yourself later. One of my paydays is definitely coming off here with Cyclonic Rift. Invested these in between $2 to $4 in Cyclonic Rift, and now they're up to $8.50. In fact, you can find buy lists for $5.50. Channel Fireball's creeping up. We could see Card Kingdom actually increase their value. And this was just a duh card. This was just a very easy spec for me to get into at Modern Masters 3. It crashed all the way down in price to the $3, and I you look at EDH and you see that it sees a massive amount of play in Commander, and this is the trajectory it has to go. There is no way around it. This is the supply slowly being outstretched by the demand. So these are the cards you want to identify. These are the safe cards. These are the big paydays that then you can actually even go find a vendor that's good at getting rid of these for a buy list. You can actually go to a GP a lot of times, and the buy list is a lot more narrow between the sell price, that a lot of vendors might be trying to purchase this for. Did they just? Oh no, that's a different one I clicked on. Might be purchasing this for like $6 or $7, rather than, and then even selling it for $8. That's how crazy and slim some of these margins can be at the GPs. And again, this is a much better, safer investment than trying to get on the kind of the circus that is Modern at the moment. Another thing I'd say is that right now, I would definitely get out of a lot of cards in Standard. There's not a lot of time left in Standard, and that's including, I don't know about cards that might not be safe rotation, because rotation is going to switch things up quite a bit. A lot of people have been investing in Dominaria, saying, okay, there are some Merfolks there, so maybe we invest in Merfolk. Okay, there are some, maybe some of these legendary creatures might be able to enable what there's a card like maybe SRAM will be good because there's another legendary creature that works off R's and equipments, just like SRAM does. So maybe you could see like some sort of artifact equipment deck. I don't know. I would keep the speculation of Kaladesh, Amonkhet, Hour of Devastation, Aether Revolt. I would just take it out of my mind, because there's not enough time when Dominaria comes out to really make a investment and then a sale quick enough before the prices just inevitably crash. Your focus should be on something that has more long term. The longevity of a format like Commander is a lot better than trying to do the whole last minute pump and dump for a Standard based format, because all of a sudden cards get good. Again, I sold out of Standard a long time ago. It's a safer route. For every card that is going to go up, there's going to be 10 cards that are going to go down. For every card that's going to hit its highest price ever during Dominaria, there's going to be 10 cards hit their lowest price, and then rotation decay is just going to get them. So focus on the things that are going to last long term. I would take the focus away from Modern and Standard. And that is my Market Monday for this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like these type of videos, feel free to give a tip over at patreon.com. We actually do have a patron tier for fans of the Market Monday. You also get a pack cracked in your honor. And I do give patrons access to A, Discord. We started a Discord server. And B, I will message out patrons whenever I do feel like there's going to be a spike in price. So far, we've had some good ones on there, like Flaring Pain and Deathblade Elite. And what are some other ones I've done on that in the past. I'll try to get more active with that. The more people we actually have sign up for that tier and discuss, we'll probably make one on Discord, just a whole market, like a market Discord where we can talk back and forth about particular cards that we believe are investable. So there's power in numbers, there's power in people seeing from different angles, and I think that's something I want to get the ball rolling on. So I appreciate all the support and all the fans and everyone that has enjoyed the Market Monday videos. You guys keep me going. Thanks for watching.